The Business of Art, brought to you by the Video Department. Welcome to the Business of Art podcast. I'm your host, Matt Polson. We are here with my esteemed guest, Austin Lewis. Austin, thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You're just coming straight off of a hard day's work, so I appreciate you making your way over here. So you are the first guest that I've had on that is a fellow filmmaker. So I think that's pretty interesting that we'll get two different perspectives sort of from the same genre today. I have an idea of, I know when we first worked together, was that also kind of our first time really meeting?
I think so, because, again, it's like the Richmond theater community. I feel like people know who people are.
Yes.
But then you actually meet the person, you're like, okay, so now I met you, but I know exactly who you are, and the other person usually says the same thing.
So what was your involvement with the Richmond theater community? Because I know you more as a film guy.
Oh, sure. Well, so I majored in theater in undergrad, and I used to act a lot more. And
what program?
It was up in Washington College, up in Maryland, so about an hour and a half outside Baltimore, D.C., kind of Eastern Shore. But small liberal arts school, and the theater program there was really great, and kind of sucked me in, and I didn't know if I was going for writing or for what, but I fell into theater and really enjoyed it, and so then I kind of came out with that, and then I got to know a lot of people in the theater community because I was working the box office for Richmond Shakespeare Festival for a few years, and so you kind of get a nice cycling of people coming through working on shows there, and so I kind of got pretty entrenched in the community through that.
And so were you working out at Ashcroft Hall? Okay.
Yeah, and that was I've met a lot of great friends there, and a lot of good people. So
that's a great program. I'm really glad that they changed their name back to Richmond Shakespeare.
Right, isn't it nice? Yeah.
I won't say anything bad about the other name, but I just felt like Richmond Shakespeare was such a great brand and a great name. And I'm really glad that they made that change. I think that was really smart.
Yeah, and hey, says what they are, and of course they do other stuff, but it's certainly kind of like the genre sort of projects that they're working on. I think,
and there is a rich history of Shakespeare companies that do other stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything weird about that. And so, did you do any shows in town?
I did a little bit. Let's see. I think for the most part, not a ton, but I did do. We did this one project where we would do Shakespeare in bars. And so we would go perform.
Did you do it at Capitol Ale House?
Not at Capitol Ale House, but we did Strange Ways.
Okay.
We did. I remember we went to O'Connor's Brewing in Norfolk, and there was one other show.
El Guapo.
Oh yeah.
Great beer.
Yeah. And I got it for free that night. I had a lot of free El Guapo that night.
Yeah. That's a tough beer,
man, too. I tell you what, the whole. Luckily, I was not driving home that night.
Yeah.
But the we did that, and I think it was at Three Notched. I think we did another show. But it was really cool. It was like the drinking scenes, like the porter scene from Macker's, and like the Tempest and stuff like that would have like kind of fun scenes that were like, hey, Shakespeare isn't so uppity.
My first Broadway show that I saw was in New York. That's obviously it was in New York. Was at the, I guess, is the Kennedy Center or the Lincoln Center in New York?
Center. Yeah.
It was at the Lincoln Center, and it was the Henry Cycles, and it was Henry the Fourth, Part 1 and 2, and Henry the Fifth.
Wow, that's a marathon.
It was like 4 hours. There's 3 intermissions, but Kevin Kline was playing Falstaff.
Wow.
And so I will just never forget like one of his opening monologues, and just like he was just a different human because he's always been one of my favorite actors.
Oh yeah.
And Falstaff, basically, if you don't know, looks like Santa Claus, like traditionally, like that's his body type, and you just don't think of Kevin Kline as that. And it was truly transformative.
Oh, he would have been amazing. That was another scene I think we did, was his about beer, and he's like, I don't trust a man who doesn't like beer. And yeah. That was another one we did.
Yeah. And so I believe certainly the first time that we worked together was during COVID, and I was hired by Virginia Rep to put a few of their touring shows on film, basically, because that was the only way that people were going to see them.
Right.
And we brought you on as the second camera, and that was a pretty wild experience because, for the most part, not for the most part, we were literally seeing it for the first time.
Yeah,
that day.
yep. We'd be like, oh, that's going on. Oh, that's happening.
Yeah. Which is, I feel like, unfortunately, too much of how I shoot these days. I have very limited opportunities to rehearse anything that's going to happen before. Most of it is just almost documentary style, just walking in and capturing whatever is happening. But that one was, I feel like, particularly challenging. Probably more so for you, because if I remember correctly, you were on the close-up lens.
Yes. Yes.
Which makes it a little bit more challenging.
And you're like, okay, I've got this person, and then you're like, oh, do I go over to the other person that's talking, or are they going to talk again in just a second? And you're going back and forth. Yeah. So that was always a little nuts, but
yes, that is the dilemma. Yes, but it all turned out really great.
Yeah. I think and it was like, because I know they also had a few other initiatives. I was helping out with some of the editing of like the bedtime stories, and then the
God, so many
bedtime stories,
the song things,
and that taught me a lot, because I think for the most part I've edited a lot of mainly the stuff that I shoot. And in that case, it was definitely like, you're having to provide instruction to somebody else on how to shoot. And, maybe you get footage that someone who's not as knowledgeable, someone who's more knowledgeable, and you're trying to kind of like zhuzh up the footage a little bit. And you kind of are like, okay, what can I do with this? And what do I have to kind of tweak in order to get this to, another level? And that was definitely a learning experience for sure.
I feel like we are both in that realm of the videographer world where we are primarily editing what we shoot ourselves most of the time.
For the most part, yeah.
It is a blessing and a curse.
Yes, because sometimes it is great because you're like, oh, I remember I got a better shot of this or something.
That is definitely part of the blessing.
But some of the curse is certainly then just being like, oh, I made a mess of the game.
Oh, you idiot! Why did you cut there? Why didn't you keep going?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you shaking the camera right here?
You
idiot!
The self-disdain that comes from it. Yeah.
To just be clear to the audience, that is me talking to myself, calling myself an idiot. There have been some times where I've really I don't do it so much anymore because like Allison has helped me with my mental health. But like there have been some times where I have really been a mope around the house because of how badly I felt like I shot something.
Oh, sure. And that's something that like I know for me, working a 9-to-5 on top of kind of doing my other projects is one thing I missed freelancing was having coworkers, because you can kind of commiserate a little bit, and you can kind of you can also, I don't know, you kind of get a little better gauge of what's going on, because when you're the only person working for yourself, you're kind of like, it all comes back to you, and you can be like, oh God, I can't believe I didn't do this. That. When hey, if it's a bigger company, you can be like, I can't believe that person did this. And they're just some faceless person,
exactly.
So but I think that's definitely like you really got to work on that mental health when you're working when you're freelancing and working with yourself. When you're your own coworker, it's for sure. Yeah,
I'm lucky to have a wife who works just in the other room, and so we're able to frequently collaborate. But that's also a challenge and its own conversation and its own podcast, working with spouses.
Oh, sure. I'm sure that's a whole other bag.
Maybe me and Allison will start a separate podcast.
Oh, yeah, you should.
Honestly, it's not a bad idea.
That is not a bad idea at all.
The title needs a little work.
You can say it started here today.
Yeah. So take me back to either when you first fell in love with movies. Maybe let's start there and then work me into when like you actually were picking up a camera to do things yourself.
Sure. Well, I always like to talk about, I think I've always been kind of like doing visual storytelling in some capacity, because when I was in middle school and most of high school. I was making comic books. I was drawing comic books, and so I probably had I think I got 25 issues into a series over the course of middle school. And I'd come home and my mom would be like, "How was school?" And I said, "Well, I got 30 pages done." And she'd be like, "Great, how are your classes?" And I'd say, "Oh, what are the classes?" But I think, there was that. And then, again, when I went to undergrad, I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do. I knew I kind of wanted to do maybe some form of writing.
Yeah.
And then I fell in love with the theater department and theater itself. And so I think it was kind of it was pretty late. It was kind of my senior year of undergrad that I did a few films with my friend Nick there. And I kind of realized, I said, this is sort of a good marriage of the two. It's visual storytelling from kind of a directed perspective, and the same way that you can kind of frame a shot and
in a comic book
and sort of tell the story between image to image, and apply theater, the art of kind of like improv and performance, and sort of having somebody else inhabit a character. And I think film was very much a great marriage of the two. And I decided, you know what? I think I'll be happy if I work in film for the rest of my life.
In some ways, a comic book is really just a much more ornamented storyboard.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's something, for me, it's become a really big part of my process is to storyboard. Because and what's great, I've got like my director of photography on a Zoom call, and I just have my iPad displayed on as a screen share, and then I just kind of draw out what I'm thinking, and they'll make suggestions, and I sketch it out, and I say, "Is that sort of what you're thinking?" And they'll say, "Yeah," or they'll say, "Well, move it over here," and so
you're actually sketching by hand, like you're like doing actual sketches.
Yeah, just with like an Apple Pencil. So that's become really invaluable to my process. I think is that storyboarding process. Yeah.
Do you draw? Or are you like an artist? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't. It's I made the transition over to like an iPad and the Apple Pencil and Procreate on there, and it's really, it really opens a lot of doors in terms of what you can do with it. I haven't been doing it much lately, but yeah, that's always kind of been a love of mine.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I didn't realize that. And that's storyboarding has always been one of the pain points, I would say, in my process. But not to go off on this tangent, but I feel like with AI now, it's like become much more easy to at least get something.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like when you have an artist who's actually working with the actual characters you're working with. But you can at least get kind of similar shots and framing and angles and backdrops and stuff like that. Oh, absolutely.
And even just like, I've even seen great directors draw stick figures, and it gets the point across. It's you have that visual. You've got like I want a medium of their face and their shoulders in shot, and someone can take that and say, "Great, love it."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have like a core group of people that you work with when you're working on your creative projects?
Yeah, for the most part, I've got a few people that I bring along on each one. There's a director of photography I've worked with a few times now, named Emily Marquet, and she's fantastic. She's going to grad school at AFI this coming year, so she's not going to be around here, but she was in London before, and she's all over the place. But she's been really great. We've got a great rapport.
Awesome.
And I think that's been really great. Again, and we figured out the rapport with the storyboards and in terms of working together and letting her kind of create her team and build her team. And I know the people that are on her team, and that's been great. My buddy Dewey, I always bring along, and he's usually a great AD. Or whatever you need him for. He's always game, and he's always there to help out. So.
Anybody named Dewey is going to be a person you want on your team.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that to be true.
Yep.
You heard it here first. And so you have. Let's go back. What was the very first short film that you made?
So we did a what was it? I don't know if that was my very first one, but back in boarding school, I did a short series called Boarding and Board. And it was just me and my friends who didn't have any acting inclination, and I just roped him in, and so we did these little skits about what it was like being at boarding school. But then I think I picked it back up in college. We did a not a 48-hour film project. We did a 24-hour film project, which was kind of like, I look back at that and I'm like, that was insane. But we did a noir film called No Booze for Freshmen, and and we had such a blast with it. We actually won the competition that year,
nice.
And I think that was a big. I think then we basically made sequels to that, a sequel and a threequel, and the threequel I probably spent just as much time on it as I did my thesis, and I called it my second thesis pretty much. But I think that was sort of where, working on those, I think I kind of realized, like, oh, I think this is something I really love doing, and I think I could keep doing this.
Was that in college?
Yeah, we did. Again, the threequel was a full half hour. It was a full half hour thing, and I scored it. I spent all my spring break just sitting at the computer scoring the thing, and that was back in the days when I was acting in what I was shooting, which that's another thing.
Can't imagine.
I'm like, not doing that again.
Yeah.
I'll be on one side of the camera. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we worked on those, and I think they were goofy noir spoofs. But I've always had a soft spot for noir, so I definitely ran with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like noir and horror are like the two genres that young filmmakers gravitate towards.
Yeah. The gateway.
Definitely my first 48-hour was a noir. And I think my second one was a horror.
There you go.
And no, you know what it was? The first one was a noir horror.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. There you go.
I'm almost
do horror, but make it black and white.
Yeah. We couldn't decide on a genre, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
great.
In terms of the timeline then, so you graduate from Washington College? From Washington College. And then what's the timeline between when you graduate from Washington College and when you do your first feature?
Oh, sure. So that was, I think what I did when getting out of college was I started making I started just running and gunning a few kind of shorts and web series that I look back and they're pretty rough, but you saw in each one I got incrementally better. I think I would try new things. I'd imagine these sequences. I'd try them. They worked or they didn't. But I just kind of went out and did it. And sometimes I look back on that and I was, and I'm envious of kind of how fearless I was at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was okay with that. Whereas, sometimes nowadays I feel like I get caught up in it a little bit of being like, well, is that going to work? I don't know if that's good, this and that. But at the time I just went out and did it. And I think that did a lot for me. But what I kind of gathered together this group that I'd built. And there was a film I really wanted to make, People Don't Die in the Comics Anymore, which was based off of my own experience. It was about a guy trying to get over or trying to deal with his friend's suicide, and it was something that I'd lived through and was really, I'd taken all these kind of notes and made all these drawings and just had a lot of material to work with, and it was something I really wanted to do, and so I wrote it for a class that I like a writing class. And then I said, well, let's see if we can do it. And we crowdfunded it, and we shot it for about $10,000, which is like nothing. But we, it was, again, that was another time that I look back and think about, kind of, I was a lot more fearless at the time. And I mean, there was one instance where we had this one location that was, we had this one corporate scene where we met the CEO of this company, and we had this architecture firm. We went, we put on our best suits, and these two 20-year-old guys walk in, and me and Dewey, and we had this meeting, with these people, and they agreed, and then they sent over the contract, and they wanted about $5,000 to shoot in there, and I was like, hey, by the way, that's about 10 times our location budget. So I just went into all the lobbies of downtown Richmond, and I asked, "Who's your property manager? Can I talk to them?" And the BB&T building over on 9th Street. They were like, "Well, our property manager works in the building. Let me see if they're there." They happened to be there, and they said, "Yeah, sure. You can shoot here. Just put down like a $200 deposit that will cash if you break something, and that's about it." And so we're able to shoot in like a lobby of a big corporate building for nothing.
That's awesome.
And so, it's which Richmond is a great place, I think, for that. I think if you were in LA and you tried to do that, that would be $5,000 every
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, or more than that even. And so Richmond, is like just enough of a small place that I think people are like, "Oh yeah, sure, you seem fine. You've got insurance. You've got, hey, by all means, go for it." Yeah.
And that's an age-old lesson of asking for what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a big theme that I have found in the few interviews I've done so far on this podcast is cold calling.
Cold calling. Yeah, exactly.
The effectiveness of cold calling.
I tell you what, I showed up that day. I talked. They said our property manager's here. They went in. They said, "I think we might be doing construction." And the guy walked by, and they said, "Hey, are we doing construction that day?" He said, "No." And they said, "All right, well, great." And
Wow.
it all just happened within 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're toiling over for weeks.
Oh my God!
And then it all
absolutely.
comes together.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, things work out like that. That's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how long did you work on that project?
That we shot on exclusively on weekends, which was kind of good because if something went wrong, I had 5 days to sort of fix it, and I'd quit my restaurant job. I was like, "I'm quitting my job. I'm going to make my movie," and all that. But that was what I was working on. I think we worked on it from, I think maybe about 2.5 months.
Okay.
Of just weekends.
So like 10 weekends or so?
Yeah, pretty much. And so we, and running and gunning it.
Yeah, I mean, 20 days for a feature, that's not much.
I tell you what, and we shot it on a GH5 right there, just like that. And some Rokinon lenses, and I got a great cinematographer for that. His name is Colin Erner. Who's still in town, but he's a great director, and I kind of learned how great it is to sort of have a director of photography that also has a really good sense of directing, and can kind of talk about this image and this image together, this will tell this story and that, and instead of just kind of saying, "All right, sure, we'll shoot it and it looks pretty."
No, you have to be an editor too.
Yeah, exactly.
And directors, I feel like, tend to be in the edit even if they're not physically clicking the buttons.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and I think in terms of filmmaking, it's and to your point, I think for me, a lot of times I've had to even stop myself a little bit from making the edit on set. I'd say we're not going to use this shot after this point, or oh, well, we don't need that because I'm not going to edit it in. But it's learning that actually, let's get it. Better to have it, not need it. Yeah. Let's try it a few different ways. And then the edit, you have all these options. Yeah. I think that was a big lesson for me, for sure.
Yeah. A lack of options in the edit is the worst.
Oh man, yeah. And you're like, well, we cut there because we thought we weren't going to use it. We didn't play through the scene, and now we're stuck. Yeah.
How long did it take you to do the post-production?
It took a while. It took quite a while. It took maybe a year, but that year included me having to get a new computer because I the one that I had was just not cutting it. And then I put together an edit, and then I screened it a few times for people, and kind of got their thoughts, and then I make some edits and show it to a different group of people, and then make some changes, do it again, and have some of the same people come back and all this. And so I got a bunch of notes, which can be overwhelming for sure. You're putting it out there and you're like, I nailed it. And then people say, well, I was confused about, or you fix a problem and then another problem arises or something. And but I found that really invaluable, the screenings for people to kind of gauge how things were playing out. And I remember there was one day I had to, I kind of came to the decision I had to get rid of this one monologue that was like the monologue. It was like the, the statement of the movie, the point, the whole thing. It was an audition monologue and everything. And I went, you know what? I think we got to cut it, and it was a hard decision, but I've stood by it forever. It can be hard to kill your darlings for sure.
Can't be afraid to kill your babies.
You can't, and that's a lesson you learn constantly. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's because it's just so hard to do. But then once you make that move, and you sit with it, then you go, yep, that was it. That was the answer. Yeah,
that's the great thing about working with digital film too. It's easy to see what it would look like without something, and then if it's like, oh, it needs it back, you just put it right back in.
Exactly. It's so funny. My teachers would always be like, you kids these days, you got your digital film and your LEDs and your
Yeah. My LED collection has grown. I don't know if you can see the
beautiful
the Amarans back there.
The Amarans, classic. Yes.
Yeah, I did some green screen stuff recently, and luckily where we went, they ended up having a bunch of supporting light. And so, but if I hadn't had that supporting light, I was like, oh, wow, I do not have enough light to both fully evenly light the green screen and then the person in front of the green screen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had to pull that out.
That's, it's so funny when I've had people be like, yeah, we could just green screen it. I'm like, well... Yeah. It's that and the lighting. You got to get the lighting down.
Then the editing, of course.
Yes, of course.
So all in, let's just say from writing it to finishing in post-production, we're looking at like 18 months probably?
Something like that, yeah. And I always talked about how funny for me it was. I feel like I was a different person who wrote it, a different person who shot it, and a different person who edited it. Yeah. My life changed throughout it, and it was very much different circumstances each time. And that's kind of interesting too, especially when it's something so autobiographical as that one was. I think that was really a ride. And of course, like even in production, I think everybody was pretty aware that it was autobiographical, and I'd kind of I tried to keep a good story, because I think instead of saying like, oh, well, this could play out this way, that would probably work better narratively, as opposed to, well, that's not how it happened.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can kind of make a few adjustments there and make sure that it's emotionally true, not necessarily exactly how things played out. But I think, so it was about 18 months, and then we got to premiere it at the Bird, which was probably one of the best days of my life. I think that was because we even my buddy who worked on it had a family friend who drives like a 1925 limo, and so I like showed up to the theater and I made sure the ticketing software was working, and I was like, okay, the people have there, we got this, okay, I'll be right back. And I like drove down to the Kroger parking lot and got in the limo and rode it down Cary Street, and we got out there and I made the big entrance and everything. It was so ridiculous. We had a great time.
That's fun.
Yeah.
And then did you do like the festival circuit after that?
I didn't do it with that one. It was I didn't really have the money to do that, and it's, I think we screened it a few other times, but for the most part, I think there were like a few technical elements that that kind of were a little wanting. We were just kind of running and gunning it, like I said, and I think so it wasn't quite up to snuff to submit, but I've done it since with other projects, and that's the festival circuit's always, that's...
Is it expensive? I've never done it.
It is expensive. I mean, some of them can be upwards of $75 for submission, and that absolutely does not guarantee you get in. So I think a lot of times people even say attribute a third of your budget towards festivals if that's your plan. And which is, I remember thinking like, what? That's crazy. That's nuts. But I've been shopping around my grad thesis, Wild Man, and that's I've got that out to probably, how many at this point? Probably like 30.
Really?
30 of them, and some of them are $10, and some of them are more expensive, and it depends where in their selection process they are. They've got early bird deadlines and regular deadlines and late deadlines, and those all cost different amounts of money. But yeah, it's so I'm waiting to hear back from I think about 20 at this point.
Yeah.
And of course, out of the 10 that I did hear back from, I've gotten into one.
Nice.
So that's kind of the ratio you got to work with. But it's,
what is that one?
It was Indie Short Fest.
Okay, I saw that.
Out in Charlottesville.
Great.
Yeah,
congratulations.
So we went last weekend.
It already happened
as of recording. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was it was really cool. And you get to network a little bit, and I think I did a lot of reading about festivals and how to get the best out of them, and you got to kind of know what you want to get out of it when you go, because it's if you want it to be your big break into Hollywood, it's probably not going to be, and so, but what are you coming with? What are you bringing to the table? Do you want to, turn it into a feature? Do you want to network with people? Do you want to just go have the festival experience? That's a whole valid other thing. So,
and what do you want from Wildman?
I think for me, I like enjoying doing the networking a lot. I've always said if I get to travel to show it, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it plays out. I submitted to a few in LA because there's some friends out there. I'm trying to get the excuse to go see them.
Yeah.
I think kind of pad the resume a little bit.
Yeah.
With some laurels basically,
Sure.
which you can kind of go to some there's definitely festivals that they call like laurel farms. They're like online awards, and they'll kind of take your money and either give you
get something.
You get something, and you get a laurel that says semifinalist, but really, like, if somebody in the industry sees that, they say, oh, well, that's a laurel farm, so
that's cool. I've not heard that term before. That's
cool.
Cool.
That was one I was reading about, and it's
nice. We'll clip that one for YouTube, folks.
There you go, laurel farms. Yeah, that would be great to have a location in a film called Laurel Farms.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it does sound like a neighborhood.
Yeah, right.
I'm almost positive we need a Jamie from Joe Rogan podcast. Look up Laurel Farms. See if there's
Look up Laurel Farms real quick. Yeah,
there's no one there.
just my jacket in the shape of a person. Yeah.
So when did you know that this was like your future, like your profession?
Yeah, I think again it was sort of in undergrad. That senior year, I think, was a big point for me. And then I think sort of going into these web series and all this, I think once I really sat down and kind of realized, wow, we know enough people, we have the skills and the resources to make People Don't Die in the comics anymore. Let's do it. And I think that was sort of, again, I quit my restaurant job and all this just to make time.
Which was where?
Terrence. Good old Terrence. Oh man, yeah, back in the day.
Some she crab soup.
Oh man, I tell you what, getting that for free, I would just sneak a little bit.
That's dangerous.
Oh, it is. But it was kind of, I think that point was, again, that kind of like, wow, I think we can do this, and we can make it happen. And for me, I think I learned a lot that I really like directing, not necessarily my own writing, but I really like, I always kind of compare the director's job to being like a funnel. You cultivate this top level of ideas and collaboration and all this, and then you sort of find your way down to, okay, what are we going to do? And you make the decision there at the end and say, all right, this is what we're doing. But again, I've gotten great shot ideas from our sound guy, which, like, in film, sometimes you do kind of have to stay in your lane and make sure, but I think, but I do really like that collaboration and that anybody can kind of have a good idea. But what the director says is what you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the top end of the funnel is the other really talented people.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. You get very talented people, and then,
and it's almost like And in some ways, maybe this is more theater, but in theater, it's more of an inverted funnel. But I think in film too, where the director is at the top.
Oh, yeah.
And he has ideas, and he's like, sound person should sound like this, costume person it should look like this. Or if you don't know, I don't know, you come up with something, you know what I mean? Or something in between. And then, yeah, you're right. But either way, the funnel idea works because ultimately then that person is... It's like a funnel at the top and then a funnel at the bottom, because once it goes into the funnel and all the people come up with their ideas, then the director is extracting his favorites, his or her favorites from all of those different artists.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, I mean, at the end of the day, the director of theater has to kind of let it live and put it out and say, all right, it's gonna, and of course, I know a lot of directors come back and they check in and all this, but still, I think, it's...
And a good stage manager keeps them in lockstep.
Keeps them in line, exactly, yeah. And I think, it's certainly like a, I think in a lot of things, you kind of, you hand over these characters in some way, and you say, hey, this is your character, embody them and be them. Well,
I mean, I think most directors want to work with an actor who they have to do as little as possible to direct them. Like you have to really self-direct as an actor. I mean, as an actor, you have to also be a director of yourself.
Yes, exactly.
I know, and so I think that, you hear directors say that all the time, like just stand on your mark and say your line, and like shut up and go back to your trailer or whatever.
Exactly.
And like there is definitely some truth to that. Like people don't think about the fact, if they've never done it, that the director is thinking about literally everything. And the a lot of times, unfortunately, the acting is the last thing that gets adjusted or that gets any attention, because the other stuff is so demanding.
Oh, yeah. That's so funny you say that, because we had a running joke on People Don't Die in the Comics Anymore with, so Adam Turk played the main character, and he was someone that he came into the audition with a Superman hat on, and like the whole thing is based off of like a comic that is an equivalent of Superman, and so he knew exactly what the material was about, and he came in and he like knocked out the audition, and so so he was somebody that I really didn't have to give much direction to. He really he got it, he understood it, and he just did a great job with it, and so we'd have this joke where we'd say cut, and I go over and say, let's move this light, let's try this, actually camera, can we move it over this way and do this? And then Adam would say, but was the acting good? And I'd be like, yes, it was good, it was good.
Yeah, there's so many times that the actors end up being neglected in that sort of environment, which is why it's all the more important for your team to be so good.
Oh yeah.
And the more I'm sure you work with your people, with doing your cinematographer and whoever, the less you'll have to deal with the other departments.
Right, exactly.
Because you'll have unspoken conversations, and you can, with a look, you can tell people what to do, and then they go do it, and then you can spend more time with the actors. So.
Right. Well, and I think so another project that that I worked on over the past few years was Shanidar, which is
that a feature?
Yes. Yeah. And that is that we are getting sound done on that now, and we're getting that should be out later this year. But one thing that I did with that was I got my friend Chelsea Burke to be co-director, because she's a fantastic, very talented theater director. And the story was very much is an all women story, and I was, for me, I was very much like, well, I think it's going to be important who's in the heads of departments here and who's telling the story, and here I'm not really, like, what am I going to tell them how to feel? It's kind of in that position. And so what we ended up doing really well was that she would handle very much like the performance and a lot of the emotional kind of arcs of these characters, and then I did a lot more of the technical elements, and sort of thought about the structure and thought about, like, again, the look of it and the
I mean, it is almost
shots.
two separate jobs.
It really is. It really is. And what would be great is, I think we found a great equilibrium in that we would have a conversation. I'd say, well, I like to see this maybe in the performance, and she'd say, well, I'm thinking maybe this for the shot, and then we would go. She would talk to the actors, and I would talk to the technicians, and it just kind of it worked out so well, and I've really loved working with her. I've learned a lot about, again, about really cultivating a great environment for openness and creativity. And I think seeing what she's done, I think that she's learned a ton about how to direct film, and even went on to do her recent film, The Gallery, which she directed on her own, and did a fantastic job. I haven't seen the edit, but just being on set, it was really great seeing her in her element.
Did you shoot it?
No, I was helping him with sound.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I basically told him, I was like, "What do you need?" and they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, "Oh, I could do this. I could do sound." And they said, "Why don't you do our sound?" So
nice.
Yeah. But yeah. So that's another great thing, is kind of, again, the film being very much the marriage between art and science. And there's very much the technical elements of getting the right exposure and getting good sound, and again, all the computer science that goes into the lighting and the camera, and then at the end of the day, what you're putting on screen is also just as, if not more important. So that's kind of the perfect marriage there that kind of occurs.
So what was your decision process in going to grad school?
Yeah, so I, for me, it's funny. I was just talking with some people at my work about this. For me, I knew that I kind of wanted to take the next step in getting some education in film, official education, because, again, I'd majored in theater in undergrad. But so there was that. I figured it's one day I'm probably going to end up teaching, and that would really come in handy there. And I think for me, so I started grad school in 2019, and then March 2020, it kind of, I don't know if you remember, there was this wild, I forget what it was called.
We've been calling it the dark times on here because I don't think you can say the C word on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the dark times. The dark times. There you go. Wow. So we were, so of course my schooling got interrupted with that, and we were very much, kind of, we were shooting stuff kind of by ourselves.
And you were a year into a 3-year program?
Well, into a 2-year,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I was, not even all the way through
the first
year. Yeah. And so I ended up deferring, which was a really hard decision, but I think I am glad I did, because we had the opportunity for Shanidar, and I was like, I think we're going to learn a lot there. And I think it was the summer of the protests, and I felt like Richmond was a very important place to be right now. And so I ended up deferring, which ended up being 2 whole years. But then when I went back, I think I was thinking about it, and I'd kind of written it off. I'd said, well, I got my 1 year in. Unfortunately, I guess, just life happened, and I'm not gonna be able to do it. But then the stars aligned, and I decided to go back and finish up. I had a totally different cohort, and totally different idea for what I wanted my thesis to be, and all this. But I think it really, my goals sort of changed, but they also got a little more refined, like a little more specific. And I'm like 10 times happier with the thesis I did than the one that I was going to do, which maybe one day I'll do that. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, I think,
do you think it was a good decision for you to go to grad school?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was funny because I was telling the guys at my work, they were asking me about grad school, and I was like, so at the end of the day, I'm at the same job you are, right? Like, but I think, it's definitely, it's never too late to go.
Yeah.
I think that was one thing I learned, because I think I was really much pushing to go right out of undergrad. But, my experiences of spending time, in the working world and kind of trying out things on my own, I learned so much, and then was able to sort of cultivate that more specifically with my program. Is there's an awful lot of money? Unfortunately, yeah. It's so I think if you're going there thinking that you're going to get a job out of it, you're a little out of luck. But I think that in terms of, again, knowing that I'd be teaching one day, and again, going in knowing, okay, I really want to create this thesis, and here are the resources are available to me in order to do that. And I think somebody even said grad school is 5 years. You just go to school for 2 of them. So leaving with, I went to a screenwriting class. I left with a script, and have been working on it since, and hope to kind of do something with that. And then again, created a few short films and classes, and then put everything I had into my thesis, just so I could have that and ship it out to festivals and stuff. So I think, it's worth it if you you get what you put into it. And I think that's kind of the case for most education.
Yeah.
Even when I did classes at community college, I think I got, you get in what you put into it. It's not necessarily about how much money it costs. You've got these resources. What do you want to do with them?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I guess it would just depend on the circumstances, but if, let's say, a person graduating high school or coming out of undergraduate is considering it, what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, again, I'd say, spend some time working, spend some time, just living your 20s, live your 20s and kind of figure out who you are a little bit.
How old were you when you ended up going to grad school?
I was 28.
Okay. Yeah.
27, 28. And a lot of the people that I think went, that were in my program, I think they did come out of, a few of them did come straight out of undergrad.
I agree that, do something before you just hop from one to the other.
Yeah, because I think, a lot of I know for me, I mean, I know in my undergrad, I was there to learn, but I was also there to, do all the other college stuff. And then, I think spending time outside and then realizing, this is something I want to do. And I came with a much more vigor, I think, into grad school. I was, that was my priority at that point, because again, I knew what I wanted, and I knew that was sort of it. So I think that would be my advice of again, live your 20s, work that restaurant job, work that restaurant job, and earn a little money for yourself. Enjoy that. Create your art, on your own terms. If you've got that drive, if you got that energy, then you'll manage to do it. But then that, in grad school is always an option. It's never something you have to rush into. And I think, for me, I know that the academic environment has that structure that I really like, and so when I kind of reached that point that I kind of wanted that again, I think that's when I went for it. But I think my advice would be to kind of, wait till you figure out exactly what you want to get out of it,
right? And
really go in, because it is only, this program was only 2 years. It was over like that,
and it required an undergraduate degree before you went into it.
Yeah, and so I think that'd be my advice.
And so now let's bring it up to current day.
Yeah.
You are working at CoStars now, probably the largest video department company in Virginia.
I would say so. I
mean, it's gotta be.
Yeah, when I started in August of 23.
Yeah.
I think there were maybe 70, and now there's like over 100 video editors all powering through stuff.
Just editors? That's not even including like the voiceover department?
Not even voiceovers, yeah. So it's like a ton of people all, powering through, because what the initiative is creating a video for every neighborhood in the United States, or for most of them. And so, we're editing stuff from California, from Minnesota, from Maryland, all over the place.
You are personally working on those states, or do you have one specific?
Well, we used to have specific ones. Now we kind of work on whatever. So it's so you could get, your next project tomorrow could be Minneapolis, or it could be Florida, it could be wherever. Are
you doing graphic stuff as well?
A little bit. For the most part, it's mainly just kind of compiling, and sort of you're having to look up sort of all right, what's the research behind this place, and how do we edit it in terms of the pace, and how do we what do we start with, how do we lead into it, and what are the people doing, and when,
and what is the level of interplay between the whoever is writing the voiceover scripts and what you're talking about, what's sort of been pre-shot, and how is that coming together structurally?
Well, it's interesting because we finished our sort of first phase of it in February, which was sort of making sure we had a video for each one. But now what we're doing for phase 2 is having a lot more departmental communication. Interdepartmental, that's what I was trying to say.
You did pretty good.
Yeah, there we go. But yes, we've got a lot more communication. So we're talking with photo, we're talking with writing, and we're able to sort of communicate a little bit and sort of say, we have footage for this, but it's not mentioned in the script. Can we, it's great footage. Can we have a little blurb about that?
Right.
Or for photo, we say, hey, we could use a few more people in this. Can you get this, that? And then they're able to respond and get back about what they need. And so it's real estate video, but it's
at
really
a different level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's what's been really cool about it is that, again, it's drawn in a lot of people in video and film, and so I've actually gotten to know a lot of people, a lot of local filmmakers who've all kind of found their way to this 9 to 5, and of course then they're all doing stuff outside that I've kind of gotten involved with, and like the Virginia Screenwriters Forum, and some another guy that I work with, Adam Lapallo, has been doing stuff all over town, and he also had a short go at the short festival that we went to.
Okay, cool.
And so it's
That's cool.
And then the gallery, we had a few folks show up, and we were all like, "See you tomorrow at work," yeah. But it's so it's a really cool sort of collection of Richmond and Virginia filmmakers, all kind of under the same roof.
Yeah.
So that's been really great. Great networking experience too. Yeah.
That is really cool. Yeah. And so talk to me through when you got hired and when you applied for that job. How did you learn about it, and what was the decision into taking on a full-time job like that?
Yeah, well, for me, I'd been freelancing ever since the pandemic started, and I, it's
ugly.
It's ugly. It's tough. It's tough, man.
It's rough out here, bro.
It is rough.
I see those co-star ads on LinkedIn all the time, and I'm like, my eyes, like this Pro Dog eyes. Do I do it?
Do I do it? Well, that's the thing. So I heard about it through another buddy of mine, Matt Block.
Yes.
Yep. Another Matt. But he let me know about it and recommended me, and so I came in with that, and of course, I kind of had to make the choice of, thinking, well, do I stick with my freelancing and my gigs and, kind of my level of autonomy there, or do I do this? And I think, I put the pros and cons, and and again, for me, I know one big thing, I did miss having coworkers.
You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. I know for me, I kind of, during the pandemic, it was really helpful because I could kind of control, where I was willing to go and who I was willing to interact with, and where and when. But then coming out of that, it was sort of like, well, maybe I should give this a go. And it was definitely, the corporate environment's very much a transition to make, and an adjustment. And again, I mean, I I got my coffee intake under control on my while freelancing, and then I got there, and here it is, free all day.
Yeah,
I went
that's
right
rough.
back, right down
Yeah.
the rabbit hole. But
Yeah, they've
it's,
got little snacks and stuff like that there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, yep. And so it's interesting, but I think at the end of the day, I thought my deal with myself was very much, okay, at the end of the day, though, you got to leave time to be creative.
Yeah.
And you got to, this will allow you to be able to focus on it. Because I know for me, like freelancing, I didn't get a lot of other creative work done because, I was kind of always worrying about the next thing and the next gig.
Tell me about it, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Because it kills two birds with one stone. It's
sure.
both a creative thing for me. I love podcasts, but I also get to chop it up into little marketing bits.
Absolutely.
For the company,
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think like kind of talking about sort of the ethos of your business at the end of it.
Yes,
too.
and it is continuing education units. Because every time I'm talking to someone, I am learning myself, which is
absolutely.
I think that's a good way for any sort of podcast to start with. Like the host is learning along with the audience.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's I think that's important is being a creative person that you maintain that while supporting yourself. And kind of keep that alive. And so, I've been trying to get back into writing a little bit. I was saying, it's ever since since spring has kind of come around, I've been trying to write more because my dopamine levels sort of go up from their January, February dip.
It's terrible. Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, March when the flowers bloom, I'll start writing. And I've been trying to make myself do that. But and
today was a bad day. It was rainy all day.
No, it's not good for today. Not good for today. But but that's something that I think it's been a trade-off of allowing me to, when I'm focused on my creative work, that I'm more focused on it.
Yeah.
And that's been a real blessing, I think.
No, I think it's really great, and I think it's tremendous that they brought all those opportunities to people. It was like, there was the what is the medical program over at VCU, the standardized patient program, which brought a ton of work to actors. And then there was the VCU winning presentations program, which a bunch of our friends taught. And then now there's this, which is less focused on maybe like the theater culture, which both of us have a background in, but it's still providing, it's like a new white collar job for what is otherwise somewhat blue collar work. I mean, I'm using those terms lightly, but no, I think it's really great.
Yeah, well, in the voiceover department, they've got a lot of theater people.
Yes, that's right. There are a lot of voiceover. There
and
are
so
a lot
there's
of
a ton of, I was just talking with some of them the other day, and I mean, they're just like, can you believe it?
Yeah.
Like, can you believe we're able to sort of, apply a lot of our skills to this and get paid for it, and get paid well.
Yeah.
It's
I think there will only be more opportunities like that, and I think even with AI and everything, and I do not want to get into AI. We'll save that for another podcast, but I do think that there's always going to be the need for the human touch.
Yeah.
There's going to be more initiatives like CoStar's initiative with the Neighborhoods Project that other companies are going to do, and then of course CoStar is going to have new things that pop up that they have to do. So I'm optimistic that this is not the only opportunity like that that's going to present itself in town. And
well, especially I think even all these people who are involved in video editing and filmmaking all kind of getting to know each other and knowing who we all are. I think connecting them in this way is it's gonna be funny where it's here's sort of a common denominator among a lot of them is working at CoStar and wherever if we go on to something else that we still all kind of like know each other from that and are connected here in Richmond. And I think again I think Richmond is such a rich arts community, and especially the theater community is very 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 interconnected and very rich, and I think not monetarily rich, but rich, but the I think it's something pretty special that that I think is hopefully going to kind of be a similar thing with film.
Yeah. So, final question, final thoughts.
Ooh.
And I'm going to preface it with sort of an either or, but I also want you to branch out and answer however you want. For an aspiring filmmaker, would you say that, let's say they graduate undergrad and they do something like you or I did, like theater or English or something that's unrelated to film, would you say they have an opportunity to go to grad school, or they have an opportunity to do something like a co-star?
Ooh.
What would you say would be the best next step for them?
Interesting. Yeah, I think I'd say like a co-star situation would be pretty helpful, because I think that is that's a place where you can kind of like learn to work in the workforce and connect with people in a different way.
It can help pay for your grad school if you do that.
And
later.
help pay for your grad school. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because I think, again, I think grad school, you can go when
right. You can
go when it's time for you to go. Go
Yeah.
when you're go when it's right. And that's something that opportunities like a job like that wouldn't necessarily wait for you.
Yeah.
And I think you can go in there and again, I think if you've there was some guy I think that I was talking to one time, and he was a young guy, and he expressed that he was like, what am I doing working in a corporate environment? I want to be out there and freelancing and doing this and that. And somebody that I was in that conversation with had a really good advice for him. It was like, if you're that hungry, if you're that, if you've got that much energy, then do it in your off hours. Build up, your resume, your reel, allow yourself to save some money and work here. And then when that's all running and going, then jump off with a head start, if that's what you really want to do. And I think
it's great advice.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And he, my buddy who said that was very much like, oh, did I discourage that kid in this? And I was like, no, I think that was
The
great
opposite,
advice. I think
yeah.
that was really good, and I think, if you're young and you've got that energy, again, go be fearless.
Yeah.
In your time that you have to yourself, because good thing with a job like that is 5:30 hits, you can. It's your life, and you're not necessarily like kind of tethered to
Right.
to having to be doing something at any moment for it.
And even if you have a 9 to 5, you can make a feature film on a weekend.
You can still make it on weekends. It might
2.5
be
months.
exhausting, but you can certainly do it.
Well, it's going to be exhausting regardless whether or not you have a 9 to 5.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but I think, but yeah, that would be. I think that'd be my advice for sure. And it's and I mean, you work it a year, and if you're miserable after a year, you always have the option to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's a year of trying something new and teaching yourself something?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's ultimately where like the thesis of this podcast is headed to for me, is like finding a way to be creative without being trapped in the environment of just always having to scrounge for the next job or being poor.
Sure.
Like being just completely broke because you're so dedicated to your craft. And it's like, this is especially true with acting. It's got to be true in all forms of art. If the only thing you're doing is acting all day, and you're only looking at films, you're only looking at theater or whatever, and you're not doing something else, you're not climbing rocks, you're not putting together the ceiling fan in your room, you're not experiencing different things. What are you pulling from to express yourself?
Yes, exactly.
And so it's like there's almost something to having these other experiences where it's like and it's best case scenario, it's like what you're saying. You get to have a job that is at the very least adjacent to your passion.
Oh yeah.
And you're kind of in a great situation where it is your passion. Like you said, you might not be passionate about real estate per se, but every day you're refining skills for your next creative project.
They've got,
and like you said, you're networking, which is very important.
Exactly. And they've got a great program there of they do a lot of education, like a lot of continuing education, which is great. Yeah. Hey, there you go. And they've got a whole department that you know, has classes pop up, and it'll be, you know, and a lot they'll apply it, of course, to what we're working on, but at the end of the day, we're learning a lot of, you know, learning all these different programs. I've learned a ton about you know, Audition and After Effects and stuff that I didn't really know too much about, but I've been able to kind of like, they've been fostering that, because they're like, hey, a well-educated workforce is going to do even better for us. Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think, you know, I think back to when I was in college, and I worked in the dish room at the cafeteria, and it was a miserable job, but like I kind of loved it, because it almost, you know, while my brain was while my body was occupied with a task, my brain could just go wherever. Yeah. And so here I almost found I was more creative in that environment than I would be if I was just sitting with a blank piece of paper in front of me. Oh yeah. You know, being like, all right, right. Yeah. You know, it's like when your brain is active and doing other things, again, you draw from your experiences in your life, and you can, you know, find ways and take little moments from what you're doing, as opposed to if I was sitting down writing all day, what would I write? Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Your brain's being stimulated by what you're working with your hands, or going for a walk's really great. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. It was really great chatting with you. This was great. Where can people find you? Do you have any? Are there any? You can tell people where we can see some of your films. Oh yeah. Well, on my Vimeo is where you're gonna find most things, which is Remember Tommy Productions. Great. Is the name of my productions company. I've had it since high school, so I might change it at some point. We'll see. But it's actually, People Don't Die in the Comics Anymore is up and freely available now. Okay. You can check out RememberTommyProductions.com is also where you can find stuff. Some of my video work and some of my short films. Hopefully keep an eye out for Wild Man on your on the festival circuit. And once that makes the festival circuit, I'll probably make it available online. Sure. And then Shanidar soon. Look out for that screening. But that's mainly where you can find me. Awesome. Thank you so much, Austin. Yeah, thank you.